There, so that's a pretty good, a 5-minute quick overview of the project. So a lot of this slideshow kind of touches on a lot of the same stuff, but I'll speak maybe a little bit more in depth about it. So this is just kind of the outline, basically what we're going to go through, talk about the project, why we think it's important, why we're going to do it, who's in the network. So the project. So over the next 4 years, our contract is actually a 5-year contract, but our first year is taken up by basically getting staff hired, and we spent most of the winter and kind of still finalizing everything around our experimental design process and exactly what type of stands we're going to look at and how we're going to do everything. But over the next 4 years, we're going to conduct a large-scale pilot of ecological forestry. We're going to carry out harvest on, it says 150 to maybe upwards of 200 woodlots through Nova Scotia, and this is a province-wide, from Yarmouth to Miko, basically. So as Andy had alluded to, in September 2021, the Forest Innovation Trust, we call it FIT, awarded us a 9.8 or basically $10 million sum for the pilot project. So for those that maybe don't know, FIT was a $50 million innovation trust that was created around the same time or just after Northern Pulp was closed down. The idea of the funds is to fund some innovative research and look for ways to create some meaningful change in our forest products industry. So the pilot, we're aiming to quantify the economic and environmental costs and benefits of forestry that's based on natural disturbance regimes, and develop recommendations for conducting ecologically sensitive management on small woodlots. So the project works with willing landowners who volunteer to participate. There's some requirements in our project. It is it's a study site, so we've got requirements about how we're going to harvest. We have to leave control sites, and then also requirements around basically leaving it as is for a time period of probably 10 years. Basically, what would be a normal re-entry for going back into the stand and doing some more harvesting, just to give us time to be able to go back and watch how these stands develop. And so the forest stands to be included in the research project must meet rigorous site selection criteria. So that's what we're working on right now. So the rationale for the project is, while the techniques of ecological forestry have been the focus of numerous research studies for more than 30 years, there's no large-scale pilot in Nova Scotia. So we're, it was alluded to earlier, we've been good at telling you what maybe you probably should do on your woodlots, especially around ecological forestry, but this project is, we're going to take that and back it up by showing you what we think you should be doing through active harvesting. The research project is going to study both short-term economics of ecological forestry, but also the long-term impacts on forest value, carbon storage, soil nutrients, biodiversity, and other non-term values. So the next slide, I won't go through all the groups, but this is all of our partner organizations in the project. And from those organizations, we have what we call a steering committee. So one representative from each group is there, and that's kind of the entire committee. We work on a consensus basis, and they kind of guide us in our work around what specifically we're going to do and how we're going to run this project. So natural disturbance regimes. So key findings on natural disturbance regimes in the Wabanaki Acadian forests, and these are from past research out of both the Atlantic provinces and out of Maine. So average gap size in pre-settlement forests generally was no larger than 0.1 hectares. And that's from a study from Bob Seymour. Bob was one of the main advisors for the Leahy report. And then average area of forest disturbed annually is above 1% over 100 years. So, and then these are just a couple quotes from a few of from both of some of the research reports. So if the goal is to emulate most northeastern natural disturbance regimes faithfully, then the majority of the landscape must be under some type of continuous canopy multi-age silviculture that maintains ecologically mature structures at a finitely patterned scale. And that just talks about, obviously we're always going to end up with situations like Hurricane Fiona where we've got a lot bigger than 0.1 hectare patches opened up and a lot more than 1% of the forest disturbed. But in any given in any given year, that's kind of what you should expect, and if that's what we want to manage for is something a little more natural, that's our harvesting practices should reflect that too. So the pilot. So for the research pilot, Ecological Forestry aims to promote the restoration stance to more climax forest types. We intend to treat the forests in ways that bring them closer in structure, function, and composition to healthy natural forests at all stages of successional development. The goals are to build diversity and resilience, ensure ecological integrity, and mitigate the impacts of climate change. And that, so the project's rooted in existing NSDNR publications and protocols. So that's the SGEM, which is the Silviculture Guide for the Ecological Matrix. That document specifically speaks to the type of treatments that we plan on doing. FEC, which is the Forest Ecosystem Classification. So each stand that we work in, we type them out by vegetation type, soil types, and then both of those come together to give you your ecosite for the stand. We have now a nutrient budget model for Nova Scotia. What that essentially is looking at your soil type and what ecoregion you're in, and that gives you a number to work off of that tells you basically how many cubic meters per hectare per year you can take off that site based off of the soils and what they can handle without degrading your soils. So we'll do PTAs, that's just a pre-treatment assessment. And then we're also using, it's not included here, but we're using the Community Forest International Silviculture, Adaptive Silviculture Decision Key, which if you were upstairs with Gareth, Gareth is one of the authors of that, along with Megan DeGraff at Community Forest. So we're focusing mainly on applying a mix of irregular gap and continuous cover shelter wood treatments on sites dominated by early successional species. But we're also going to be looking at some later succession, older forests. You probably haven't dealt with it a whole lot in the east yet, but we've got hemlock woolly delgid, kind of marching its way through the west and getting close to. I'm from Elmsdale area, so it's getting close to us in the central portion of the province too. So we'll be looking at, your typical red spruce hemlock stands and how we're going to adapt those both for hemlock woolly delgid, but also looking at the climate change factors too, and then also. More relevant for Cape Breton, looking at tolerant hardwood and more specifically sugar maple stands, where there's issues with soil productivity, but also issues with establishing good sugar maple regen post harvest. So there's also sites like that in there. So this section talks about when we do pre-treatment assessments. Typically, we use what we call AGS and UGS, so acceptable growing stock and unacceptable growing stock. And like a really coarse definition of that would essentially be acceptable is a tree that's of a desirable species. It's good, healthy, and vigorous, and either has a saw log or will eventually produce a saw log. Unacceptable would be anything that doesn't fall within that category. When we were talking about this project, because a lot of our treatments are, we want to generate some income for the landowners, but it's not necessarily the most important thing that we're doing there. Like, we're really looking at the ecology of how that stand should transition, how we can do some restoration work. So we've actually gone and created a new category, which we're calling ecological growing stock. So that's a way to capture trees that are maybe of the right species, but they're poorly formed, never going to form a log. But if you think about a degraded site where you've only got, say, a few yellow birch or something like that growing on that site, to us it really doesn't matter if it's got good form and going to grow a log or not. We just want to keep them because that's probably what should be there. It's a good seed source, everything else. So we've created a new category specific to our project. So they're basically trees desirable for retention but don't fit the standard definition for AGS. So, the big question, how can I participate? So for anyone in here, I'm assuming there's probably a lot of members of either the landowners and forest fiber producers or the Cape CVPP. If you're a member of any of the groups that were up there before, the best way to participate is to go to whoever you would normally talk to there, whether it was Peter, Bria, or anyone, and just indicate that you're interested. And we're in fairly continuous communication these days. I actually have been up for a couple of days looking at a few potential sites on the island already, so that's the best way to go about it. But if you're not a member of any of those and you want to we're going to be doing some sites, directly for, say in my area, Hants County, we don't actually have any co-ops or anything like that there, so a lot of landowners aren't a member of anything, so that they've been just reaching out directly. So my contact info is on the bottom there with my email, but if you're here today and interested, I get a pocket full of business cards here, so just come up and corner me after the presentation too. So I missed one of my notes here too. I also should have touched on. So we're looking at the silviculture and kind of the restoration value and how we can transition some of these stands back to older forests, maybe a little bit more appropriate for the site. But because we're such a big project, there's been a lot of interest, and we also have potential to look at to involve some other research. So Pete was talking here today about some of the upland species risk birds. So that's something that we've been looking at and incorporating some of those study sites as part of one of our Fibre sites. Trying to develop a modified tree marking system more specific to ecological forestry. We're just waiting to find out on funding, but we've got a big soil sampling project that we're hoping to come up with, trying to build a baseline of real data on the state of forest soils on private land. So that'll actually be one where when we're out doing our pre-treatment assessment process, we'll take a bunch of soil samples and they'll end up going off to Dow, and they'll be able to look at them in their soil samplage and tell you exactly what the status of all the minerals and everything else are in your soil and how healthy or unhealthy it is. And we're also just trying to set up our data collection to be just very robust, because we know that in year 2, 3, 4 we may have somebody that's a researcher come to us with another project, and we're just trying to make sure we cover all our bases to be able to accommodate them both for sites going forward, but hopefully we'll have enough data from the sites that we've already completed. So that was the end of my little talk. I didn't use anywhere close all the time, so if anyone's got questions.